Hey everyone, I'm going to do a English set 1, Divine set 1 tier list, not Japanese tier list, not set 2 tier list, set 1, based on my testing with my teammates usually. And it's going to be just based on how strong the deck is, how it goes into the Springfest metagame. So it's not going to be based on 100% results, it's not going to be based on what other people think, only what I think. So you're free to disagree, but, you know, this is what tier lists are supposed to be. They're supposed to be a reflection on what people think. Well, at least what the person who made the tier list thinks of the current metagame. Now, I'm going to throw some stuff out there to you, right? If your deck makes it onto this tier list, it means it's playable to varying degrees, right? To varying degrees. If your deck doesn't make it here, it's not a deck I would consider taking, right? So this is, again, based on me. If I would take these decks to a Springfest tournament, and, you know, if they make it, cool. I will consider it, but just based on where they are, I'll consider it more or less. And if it's not here, I really wouldn't consider it at all. So just going to throw out some stuff as well. In terms of the metagame, there are 3 things I 100% have to use to evaluate whether a deck is good enough or not. So first, can it clean up its board against Shiranui? If you don't understand what this means, is that when you you can go first and ride up against a Shiranui deck. Can you clean up your board so that when they get their first stride, they have nothing to dominate? That is very, very important, in my opinion, for the current metagame. Because one of the best decks right now is Shiranui. And then the second question is, does it have enough explosive power to bash through a Luard hand? Right? Because right now, Luard is the other best deck. This is going to be spoilers, by the way. I might as well just put them right here. So where is it? Shiranui here, and then Luard here. So I'm just going to put them. These are the decks to beat, okay? Your team should probably bring at least one of these decks, if not 2. But these aren't hit. These got banned in Japanese format, but not hit in English. That's why they're so strong. Luard right now can get a huge hand, and if your deck struggles to get through a Luard hand, then, you know, your deck probably isn't that great. And the last thing that I consider a bit less, but still equally, well, not equally important, still relatively important, is that do you have something to do in the early game that's not just ride, that's it? Because if you do that, then yeah, the stride decks are just going to get really, really good, right? They're just going to have no pressure and just kind of demolish you and scale insanely. So if that is what your deck is, then, you know, that's one hit to your deck. And yeah, maybe if you don't satisfy any of those conditions, you're probably not going to be here. That's it. So other thing that people have been saying is that, you know, Luard is the absolute tier 1. Shiranui, you know, not even a tier 1 deck anymore. It should probably be like somewhere else, right? I just think that's 100% wrong. I don't know how people have been testing that, but, you know, Luard is definitely really, really good now that it has Selgion. But you can't discount how good Shiranui is. Shiranui can play, like, since everyone apparently counters Shiranui, now this deck is apparently really bad. It's not true, right? Shiranui just has insane high roll, and it really depends how you build it. So I can pull out paint here, right? So here's good old paint. So let's say this is a deck, right? I'm going to draw a deck. Normal deck. All right? This is not a Shiranui deck. It's just a normal deck. Normal Shiranui will beat the crap out of this deck. That's just how it is. Where is it? Sorry, here's a circle. Okay, this is Shira, right? Shira beats the crap out of this deck. Okay, then decks run counters to beat that. So deck with Shira counter. Deck with counter. Okay, what is the counter? So there's 2 ways to counter, right? You have a ladder. That's crazy, right? The ladder will counter you, but, you know, every deck should run that. But then, like I said before, if you can clean up the board, right, you can counter Shiranui pretty well. And then if you're like something like Morphonica, you just have inbuilt counters to Shiranui. Wow, you're just going to destroy Shiranui, right? Even Prism, right? Prism does its 1-2 combo where it cleans up the board and then just goes into ladder because it can search for it. That's a really strong counter to Shiranui. But you know what? Guess what can help Shiranui beat that is Shira's running Esperaldia, right? Shira with ESP. Right, Esperaldia doesn't care if your opponent does anything. You're just gonna still, as long as you like drop 2 Esperaldias or something like that, you still get 5 attacks with Shiranui, and that's usually enough, right? 18 plus 18. If it's not enough, then at least you still have a fighting chance. And then here you can say that a normal deck will beat Shiranui with Esperaldia, right? But that's not true. This is actually fake. I just made the last bit up. No, it just ends here. It just ends here. This is the end game, okay? Shiranuis with Esperaldias maybe are worse in the, you know, grade 2 game, but will never get screwed over by people cleaning up their boards. And then on ladder turns, you're still gonna have it really insanely strong turn, right? Think about it. First stride, 18-18 Esmeraldas because you flip something up with your Tembu. That's still a really annoying number to guard with. And then after that, you know, it only gets worse and worse. So overall, I think Shiranui plus Esmeralda is definitely something really, really scary. I know a lot of people have been you know, picking up after they get screwed over by ladders and by, you know, clean boards. So once you start putting Esmeraldas in the deck, I just feel like the weakness of Shiranui like starts disappearing, and at worst, your worst matchups are like 50-50s. Yep. So that's just my thoughts. I could be wrong, but hey, you look at what happened in WGP as well. People running counters. You know, 4 Esmeraldas, they're really good. Of course, Divine Z set 1 wasn't out yet, but that doesn't really change the fact that Esmeralda is a really, really good card. So overall, that's just where it is. That's kind of going to establish basically everything in this tier list. And, you know, those 3 things that I mentioned before as well. The rules. Can you clean up your board against Shiranui? Can you beat up a Luard, which has a massive hand later on? And then if you have a good early game, those are also 3 important factors. Let's start getting to the tier list. So first off, what is a good deck that can do all that? There's nothing else that goes to the S tier, by the way. This is the Shiranui tier. This is the Stride tier, right? Varga is a really good deck that can kind of do that. It has an okay early game. You know, it puts stuff down, puts some pressure. It can clean up the board really well, right, against Shiranui. And then it has an explosive big turns later on, like showing it damage denied. Oh, yeah. But once it gets its damage, once it gets its counterblast, it can just punch through and make you drop so many cards. Absolutely insane. So first off, Varga, really nice. Same thing with Mygo. So where's Mygo? Here it is, Mygo. I like Mygo. Mygo is cool. You don't really need much resources to get going. Once it gets going, it starts going, right? You can clean up its board again against Shiranui. Every turn, once you draw Pink Egg Girl, like whatever it is, you get that whole setup. Luard's hand is slowly going to disappear. And that's very, very important. The only weakness that I don't like about this that Varga can play is Angel Ladder. So this one can't really run it, while Varga can. So you can kind of draw through your deck and hopefully get a ladder so you can clean up the board and do the ladder play. Very, very strong, while Mygo will just have to suck it up, but hopefully that its high power lines will do enough work. And then the last one, I think in A tier, will be just Wellstra. So this is really, really same idea. You can be aggressive early, although I guess it's slightly weaker there. You can draw a lot of cards, and no matter what deck it is, once Wellstra gets a bunch of minuses on you, you just lose. Unless you get an OT defensively, right? So Wellstra is really, really scary. It has a definitive endgame where you'll just win, and then that satisfies the condition, right? Clean up the board against Shiranui, because everything's just a product and goes back to hand. Against the Luard, you'll just pop off and just kill their hand anyway. Well, just kill them. So very, very nice. I think these 3 decks are perfectly good A tier decks. You can easily... They all play very, very differently. So if you don't want to think too much, Varga's perfect for you. If you want to just play combo and Mygo, very easy deck to go through. And then if you want to be a big brain guy, Wellstra's good too. It can do a bit of everything. Lots of multi-attacks, lots of retire. Make sure to do a lot of maths. Cool stuff. After that, you guys will probably be crazy like, whoa, Kai, where's the Raziel and where's the Morphonica? That should be like A tier, man. I don't really think so, right? Personally, I think Luard, you know, mini Luard here is not good enough to be A tier yet, especially just because it doesn't bust through hands. That's my weakness. It does have a lot of the Luard power where you can play a lot of early game. Cleaning up the board is a bit iffy. So against Shiranui just probably do whatever it wants to do. And a lot of people do underestimate, like, bro, but if you just rush Shiranui, they're just dead. Shiranui can play the game. Well, these 2 decks can play the game where they slow the game down by not giving you damage, etc. And sure, this doesn't need to function a lot of CB, but you know, if you don't have a good damage count, you can't call the correct cards. So these guys can kind of slow down the game and then scale highly and then just kill you like in a couple of turns, like one shot kind of thing. So in my opinion, I feel like Raziel's still not there yet. It's just not strong enough in the later parts of the game. It's got some nice gimmicks, and eventually it will get the good stuff. But right now, still not good enough. In terms of other A tier decks, let's see. Where did I put some of these guys? I feel like let's go Prism. So I rated Prism pretty highly before. This used to be here, but then after Selgion come out, right? This matchup is really, really poor in my opinion. This becomes an actual grind game, and it becomes a grind game that Luard can eventually win. So overall, Prism's kind of dropped just because it doesn't really... It still has a great Shiranui matchup, but it just has a not a very good Luard matchup in my opinion. So kind of drops down in B. I also put Morphonica here as well. I wanted Morphonica to be good, but I feel like even though it has relatively, it's supposed to have an on paper good matchup against Shiranui, and then other things like, hey, against Maigo you can negate its pressure turn with the, I think it's like the 2-card guard attack, and it's also got a, it has an inbuilt protection against the Welstra retire and all that. In some way, it just doesn't matter, right? These guys can just kind of pop off and just do their own thing. They just ignore your like nice little gimmick and then just rush you anyway and do their own thing and win. So against Shiranui, yes, it's got its nice kind of protection song, but Shiranui, again, with the Esmeraldas, they can just drop them down, force you to guard a lot, and eventually you're going to have to drop a non-Morphonica card, and that's when Shiranui just does its own gimmick. The other thing I didn't like about this is that its matchup against Luard is not very good. The game will definitely... You're not breaking through Luard's hand unless you get like 2 triggers and you go all to Vanguard and they allow you to do that. So if that happens, then you win against Luard, but otherwise Luard can just eventually just scale again and then just kill you, and its Selgie on hand is just very, very hard to beat. So overall, I kind of put that there. Another B tier deck will just be Shamo. So it's similar to... How do you say it? So you can clean up the board, which is nice. Its early game is like pretty average, not the best. It definitely can go very explosive and break through hands, but at the same time, I feel like it's just not as consistent as the other decks, right? These other decks are relatively consistent. These A tier decks are consistent in what they do. Shamo, not so much. So you're going for the high roll here, but it can definitely punch through. So that's why I put it in B. And then I think the last B tier deck I'm going to put is a Greedon. So this is kind of weird. Greedon, you know, doesn't really have a lot of explosive push in the beginning, though it can. It can. And it just auto-loses to Shiranui, right? It just auto-loses there, doesn't it? But I think you can play it very smartly against Shiranui. Against Luard, you definitely do have something like Gorman. You just continually spam Gorman. Doesn't matter how big the hand is. Eventually, they're going to have drop all of them because of the guard restrict. It's got a nice kind of... Against, you know, Luard, you know, nice gimmicky 7 damage combo. Against Shiranui, you know, you got to play smart, but you still have the same tools that you have. So I do think it's there. It's there. But just probably against the other decks, which can pop off really, really quickly. And against, like, a high-rolling Luard, where they drop, like, double TFs, it can get pretty rough, right? It can get pretty rough. If these guys kind of roll off really quickly and pop off, then I feel like Greedon might have a bit of a hard time. But if they don't, the game is relatively stable, then, you know, Greedon does have a good chance of popping off there. So overall, I think that's kind of where it is at. And then I think that's pretty much all of the B tiers. I feel like that's all of the B tiers. Actually, no, I think I might put Youthberg might fit this B and B tier. Okay, so why Youthberg is, okay, you can't clean up the board at all. It can play a relatively okay early game, and in terms of against Luard, can it break through the hand? To be fair, it can. But the scary thing about Youthberg is that it can pop off on a really big turn 3, so it's kind of like a, I guess it's like a mini Shamo, but it can make a really strong grade 3 turn, and then just kind of win the game from there. So it's like, if you're probably here, you're either like a deck that is inconsistent, but is like popping off really crazy, or you're just playing a very kind of, you have a stable game, but just lack one of the matchups in S tier that's good, right? So again, like, you know, Raziel, bad, not very good, you know, hand, you know, destruction kind of thing. Same with Prism, right? Bad Luard matchup. Morphonica kind of similar. And then these guys are like, yo, let's go in and just destroy everyone. As long as you draw the cards. As long as you draw the cards. So, so that's kind of where they're at. So I think that's pretty good. Should Bastion be here as well? Bastion maybe? Yeah, Bastion. Yeah, let's just go in, get some triggers, and just kill my opponent. So kind of inconsistent decks that can randomly win, but at the same time, you know, they're just less consistent. And I think that's pretty good for the B tier. And then let's move on to the C tier. So I'm going to put Leonorn and the Dreduled here. So again, these decks do have high output. They just lack a lot of the other stuff that makes it important. So these decks are slow, right? At least Leonorn, you can get mushrooms and just kind of bash like that. But then against the Shiranui matchup, not the best. Jeweled, kind of similar. You're kind of sitting there until like, oh, I hope I get my Ignis kind of thing. Although you do have early pressure, you can go really early pressure with just the grade 3 Jeweled. But again, sure, you can break through hands, but at the same time, you're leaving stuff on the board, and it just feels not very great. And then also, actually, since it's June, right, we do have the new promos. I put Ava here in C. Why? Why is Ava here? Shouldn't Ava be like, boom, right there or here or somewhere? Ava doesn't really have a very good Luard matchup or Shiranui matchup. So, first off, unban Luard, farmhand, Ava, right? Well, cool. You get a Persona Ride every turn, but the numbers aren't as insane as you think, right? This is like, think of Mygo, right? Persona Ride turn, boom. Like 5 attacks with drive check, high power lines, pretty crazy. Ava, you get like 4 attacks. Sure, some of them have crit, some of them have front row removal. They're not super insane where, you know, they're not guardable, right? This is definitely guardable stuff. So against Luard, not very good. And then Shiranui, it's kind of iffy. Sure, you know, sometimes you rush Shiranui and they just don't get anything. They might win, but at the same time, they have a high, like super high output, high possibility just like killing you. You don't really have a good way of not like, you know, how do you say it? Emptying your board. You generally want to play orders every turn, so you can't really play a regular piece. So overall, not a very good like matchup against the top 2 decks. Against everything else, you have a pretty good matchup. So that's why I'm putting in C for now. And then I think that should be it, right? I think that should be it. These are all the decks that are pretty much relevant. I wouldn't really consider any other deck at the moment because they're just not good enough. Like, look at this. Look at Fennel. You can go in the trash, mate. Just how it is. What happens, though, when any changes happen to our English ban list? So let's say the Japanese ban list come into play. Will this list change? Will this tier list change? Of course it will. So what will likely happen is, you know, Luard will probably drop down to at least A. Might drop down a bit more. Shiranui the same thing as well. And then these guys will all move up 1 tier. I feel. I think that's the best. Maybe Ava moves up 2. But when that like Japanese ban list happens, I think these tiers will all be pretty similar in terms of power. So should be pretty happy if that happens. But right now, this is where everything is at, and that's, I think, you know, if you're going to a tournament, these are probably the decks you can look at and, you know, go, hey, that's my 3rd deck, right? This is literally just talking about 3rd decks. Take these 2, and then pick one from here. If you don't like any of these, there's a lot of here. If there's nothing from here that you like, there's still these. But the higher the better. But yeah, hope the ban list comes for English, so we don't have to play Shiranui Luard meta for like the rest of the year. Even though maybe it will still be the same thing if you look at the JP side. But at least for a couple of months, then our top tier decks will at least be much more, how do you say, compact, compressed, and more competitive with one another. So let me know in the comments what you think. Of course, I'm pretty sure this being here will be like, how do you say it, make people angry. But that's just how it is. Stay mad. I'll see you all later. I'll put in the comments what you guys think. I'll see you all later. All right. Bye.